I'm Justin Doucet, CEO of Pyrowave. Thank you and welcome to our series where we want to share what inspiring leaders are doing to create the future now. And today we're with Suraj Gupta, CEO of Rogue Insight Capital, a social impact-driven investment fund focused on innovation and diversity. Hi, Suraj.
Hey, Jocelyn, it's good to hear from you.
Good to see you.
You as well.
Tell me more about Rogue Insight Capital's mission. What are you doing at Rogue Insight Capital?
Yes, definitely. So Rogue Insight Capital is my family's alternative investment vehicle. And the reason we launched Rogue is we have three mandates. The first thing is to invest in companies that have diversity at the helm. The second thing is companies that are making a social impact on their community and society. And the final thing are investments where we can have strategic value. And the reason we've done this is that we've really seen in the markets, there's not enough of a focus on companies that are diverse. So whether it's females in leadership positions, immigrants in leadership positions, visible minorities in leadership positions. And also there's not enough of an emphasis on companies making a social impact. And we really have seen that there is a large blind spot in the market where there's these fantastic founders, diverse backgrounds, and diverse ways of thinking that are making a huge difference in their societies, but they can't raise capital, so they can't truly grow. So we're hoping with Rogue to spotlight many of these companies, and a lot of them in Canada, to show kind of the impact we can make on the world and how it makes a lot of sense for a venture capital company to be focused on that demographic.
You're very vocal on the need to have more diversity in the innovation ecosystem. Why do you think this is so important?
You know, it's interesting. I think for the last 2 decades, every venture capital firm, every conference, they talk about the same thing, right? We need to support more diversity. But then you look at the numbers and nothing has changed. The same tiny amount of venture capital goes towards female founders. Visible minority founders is a fraction of that. But on top of that, you know, the world is a global community. And I always question when a company has a very homogenous background, but they're trying to sell to a diverse group of people, you're not able to do it in the most effective way. And diverse companies have always shown that they can have much better value, much better execution. And you see it on the public market stage, you see it with companies, thought leadership groups, governments, you see it everywhere. So we really questioned why this hasn't really permeated the venture capital ecosystem yet. Because, you know, if you take out the social obligations, you take out the ethical obligations, these companies outperform. Financially, they do better. They raise more, they raise less money, but they have better exit opportunities. So we really think that by shining the spotlight, we can show people that there's a financial incentive to really focus on these groups.
You said that the best way to predict your future is to create it. I like that. What do you mean by that?
You know, I think that more often than not, people think of the change they want to see, and people think of the ways the world could be better. But more often than not, the ways for the world to move is for you to do it yourself. And I think that there's a lot of ways that we can better the world. There's a lot of ways that we can make change in the world, but we need to be the ones to help move the needle. We can't wait for others to do it for us. I mean, we know with Pyrowave, the incredible technology you have, the incredible technology you're building out, it's going to make a huge difference in the future of the world, right? Being able to get a lot of these plastics out of our landfills and help the environment will pay massive dividends. So for us, you know, when we look at the diversity ecosystem, we look at it the same way. You know, for years we would see that visible minorities, females, immigrants, they weren't fundraising, they weren't able to get to the point where they could be successful. And so we said, okay, it's one thing to go to conferences, speak about this, spread the word, but it's another thing to lead by example. So for us, we're trying to invest in these groups, kind of spotlight that these groups will make money, they will do very well, and they're helping the world. And hopefully more and more companies will lead by our example because they'll see that there's a financial obligation to do so.
Crises like this pandemic are opportunities to see weaknesses and identify potential for new solutions. Where do you see potential for innovation in the future that could drive major growth in the coming century?
I think that you'll see that there's more room for smaller companies to be able to come in and to make a difference. I mean, when you look at Pyrowave, for example, in the clean tech ecosystem, there's, you know, a handful of really, really giant competitors when it comes to the manufacturing and industrial space. But I think that you're kind of seeing now that people want to drive the need for change forward. And I think consumers will be more and more willing to use names that they may not be familiar with in order to drive the change they want to see. So I do think that that's where we'll be able to make more change, that you won't need to be General Electric or a Coca-Cola or a really massive name to be able to drive change. Because I think you're seeing that the funding is going to these companies to try to make change, and consumers are really, really demanding it. So I think innovation will be more tolerated and there'll be more momentum for new solutions.
So what could the government do to propel the economy of the future? If we have the technologies and we have solutions, what do you think could be done by the government and the policymakers to kind of accelerate that transition?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And, you know, we've been having these discussions with the federal government on exactly this to try to figure out how we can make this change. The one example I always love to give is when you look at the Canadian immigration system, it's a points-based system, and I think it's one of the better and more robust systems in the world. And I think that when it comes to innovation ecosystem, when it comes to grants, ideas companies are working on, things like that, I think there should be more based on the merits of the company, the founders, and the impact it can have on society. I think that right now there's a focus where it should be on the company itself, the industry they're in, how viable the company is, and all of the economic impacts the company can have. But I think that the social impacts of the company should be just as important in that front. And I think that the diversity of the company itself should also be in consideration. I think that these factors should play a large factor in how the government gives out support and gives out assistance, because the system right now is skewed in a way where we're not getting the resources to the right people. And I think that if governments and policymakers change that and change where the incentives are and look at, okay, if a company is operating in the space where if this makes it, it could make a big social impact, or if they're operating in the space and they've shown that they're hiring people that are diverse and they're helping these metrics that the governments are so passionate about moving, then I think companies should be rewarded for that.
Right, and just to follow up on that, I think one thing I keep saying when I do these panels about innovation is like, when you target a very important problem like climate change, water, diseases, or in our case, plastic waste, it's not going to go away unless you work it. And so these opportunities are there to last. And if you have a valid, differentiated solution right now that is looking for a market and a deployment, then it can only be a bright future if you've been targeting something important.
I completely agree. I mean, I think one of the best examples, right, is with no one driving, with nobody on the roads, with no pollution, people are seeing, tangible changes. Everyone's saying, you go downtown in any given city and the clearance and the visibility is unbelievable, right? So I think that it's going to be, I hope that it'll be hard for consumers to go back to what we were before, where there was this pressing need for addressing global warming, but no one was really doing enough realistically. Not everyone was not doing enough collectively, I should say. So I do think that something like this will kind of show people like this is what the world could be like, right? There are ways we can make changes where we don't have to deal with the pollution and the issues that we've been dealing with for how many years. So I think that things like this can kind of move that needle where consumers will start seeing ways they can make a difference that aren't really detrimental to their way of life.
Well, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure, Suraj, to see you and sharing your vision. And thanks to our viewers for being with us today. If you like this interview, please share and stay with us for more inspiring conversations with leaders making the future now. Bye-bye, Suraj.
Thank you so much. Good seeing you.